what I have in this tutorial for you is a very distinct pattern of how to look at your food labels on the packages as you go to the store and to the market. And you need to be able to decipher those because they're a little bit misleading in a way that you can go back each and every time you go back to the market. You're going to be able to save time and get the right ingredients or the right packages or the right food items or flavors to make your life a lot easier and to be able to have delicious food all the time. So if you learn this, you're going to free up your time. You're going to make sure that your body is not getting poor ingredients and poor quality as you store it in your cupboards and as you take things out of your refrigerator, as you put together your meals. So, what the food label is it gives us some quality facts, but it's hard to decipher sometimes. It's somewhat misleading as to what we should be looking at. So I'm going to make sure that we really go through the label and the ingredients to where you really understand them, and then as you go through and you spend a little bit of time, you'll be able to then make note and have these on your regular item list as you go, and you know to replenish them all the time, and it frees up a lot of your time, so you can really get going and preparing your meals and enjoying your delicious meals too, and of course taking the time for them as well. So what we're going to look at first here is the list is like a recipe. So the first thing we look at here is that we're looking at the list of ingredients. So you don't pick up the package and you look at the label to get the facts until you first look at the list. And you look at that because that's your recipe. And one little note on that as well is, are you looking at the list of ingredients and looking at this food item that's packaged? Is it an ingredient in something that you're going to combine with other things to make it into a meal? Is it a snack and you're just going to have it separate by itself? Or is it a flavor or a spice or some kind of other thing you're just going to use sparingly? So depending on what you're going to have, you're picking it up for, and what you're even going to look at the label for in the first place is going to then determine. Your list is going to be your first 1, 2, 3, and 4 ingredients. That's going to determine your recipe. So with this, you're going to make sure that you're doing this because you're finding out what are the main ingredients in the recipe. After that, it's going to be all somewhat fillers and additives. You can even see there it says the rest. It says contains 2% or less of that item, and you want to know if it's fillers, is it preservatives, right, or is it flavors? What are the last pieces of the list, and what things constitute the recipe itself? And then from there, okay, now we can look at the quality. Now we can go up to the facts of themselves, all right? And what we want to look at first on the actual label is the fiber. So again, if you're looking at this food label for a complete meal, then you want to know what kind of food is in that meal, right? And that fiber could say 0. So a great example of something that we buy typically a lot of times is something that we think of as grains. Well, we have grains are going to be our breads, our cereals, our pasta or other grains that we have. And if you look at the difference of some of those, you're going to see on one food label, it's going to say, and I usually make the example of something like a bread, it's going to say it has 0 grams of fiber. But yet the list is saying the recipe has, wheat this and, sugar or some other, items to make up that recipe for that bread. And then you look at another bread label, and on that facts it says it has 2 or 3 or 4 grams of fiber for the same serving size. So you're looking at the quality. If it doesn't have any fiber, the quality is very low. That means it's going to have like all manufactured items, right? Is it actually food, or is it manufactured items, and that's producing your recipe to get that bread made? So that could go with other things, cereals. It can go with your pasta or your other grains. And this is of a high importance to you, because this is what's going to go into your system. This is what's going to mean that you're going to actually have health. Okay? And the next thing we're going to look at for quality is, what kind of fat is that label saying? Is that label saying fat in a high amount of saturated fat, which is going to be solid at room temperature? Or is it going to be liquid at room temperature? And was it made with the recipe there, was it made with things like oils that were good for us, and they have poly and monounsaturated fats? So saturated fats are not very good for us. They're going to elevate our LDL cholesterol in our body, whereas poly and monounsaturated fats are going to be lowering our LDL, or our bad cholesterol, in our body. So obviously we want to check on the type of fats, because that's going to, again, determine the quality of that food that we're buying. Now, if we want to go just one step further, we want to look at trans fats. Now, we shouldn't really be buying any products or any foods or any packaged foods that have trans fats in them, because the trans fats means that it was really a processed fat. It was once a liquid at room temperature, and now it's a solid at room temperature. And there's ways that the manufacturing processes can do this, but we want to make sure that it doesn't say trans fats are elevated or has trans fats in it, because then that is really going to cause a lot of stress within our digestive system, cause a lot of stress within our circulatory system, and our heart as well. So next thing we want to look at here is protein. Now, I have down here catabolic, and I'm not sure yet if you understand the difference between the catabolic state of our body as opposed to the homeostasis state of our body. So I want to make sure I differentiate these two things for you, because we really aren't really very concerned a lot of times with getting enough protein each day, because everything that we eat, as long as it's good quality and we have a list of good ingredients in our foods that we're eating, we're getting a lot of protein. We just are looking at now, do we need higher protein requirements because our body's in a catabolic state? So our body would only be in a catabolic state typically if we have an injury or some type of trauma, or we are imposing a catabolic state upon our body because we're limiting the amount of carbohydrates that we're taking in. So if we have a low carbohydrate intake, that means if we're taking in 120 grams or less of carbohydrates, that's about 480 calories of carbohydrates. If we're not taking that in, then our brain is getting deprived of the carbohydrates it needs each day. So our body starts breaking down our body, our muscle and our body systems, so they can provide our brain with energy. This is when we get into these types of low carbohydrate diets and things, that our body is, our blood sugars are not sustaining our brain anymore, so we go into a catabolic state, and that's when we need maybe an increased protein requirement. But in our homeostasis, in the diet that I do and that I have all my clients do on Lose the Weight First, we're talking about keeping a homeostasis. So we're taking in 120 grams or 480 calories of carbohydrates per day, and that keeps enough energy for our brain to be satisfied, and we never have to go into this catabolic state. So we have a very balanced protein requirement, and that's we're conserving our protein stores. We're conserving our lean muscle. We never want our lean muscle to go away. We want to build a strong, healthy body for lasting personal success, and that's only going to happen if we keep our brain having the appropriate amount, of energy each day, and having our lean body mass maintain and conserve and preserve that lean body mass. So we don't want to release protein in a catabolic state. We do want to make sure we have adequate protein throughout each day, but we don't have to have an overabundance, which is sort of that patchwork that a lot of diets have, is they want you to have a high protein intake because they're setting into this catabolic state within the body. As you know, what happens when you have a catabolic state happen, whether it's 2 days, 20 days, 2 months, or 2 years, your body in a catabolic state is going to then fight back and try to conserve and preserve everything it can after you go back to normal eating. So here we are. Food labels are of utmost important. We want to look at that list of ingredients. We want to look at the quality of the food that we're having, and we want to make sure that our protein requirements are there, but we're never going into a catabolic state anyway, so that we're preserving and conserving. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you on the next video and making sure that you get all the information that you need, that's up to date, that you can clearly understand and put into practice to make sure that you're building that strong, healthy body for lasting personal success. And thank you so much. I'm very grateful that you watched this video all the way through, and that I know this is important information for you because you want the utmost health and longevity within yourself, your family, and all those that are around you. So thank you so much.